Ben Hogan called it the finest golf swing he ever saw, man or woman. Byron Nelson said the same thing. Teachers still study grainy film of it, frame by frame, more than 60 years later. And the woman who owned it walked away from the game at 34. Not because she lost her touch, not because someone finally beat her. She left while she was still the best player alive, and the reason is sadder than anyone expected. Mary Catherine Wright was born in San Diego on the 14th of February, 1935. Her father, Arthur, was an attorney. Her mother, also named Mary Catherine, kept the house. Because mother and daughter shared a name, the girl became Mickey, and the name stuck for the rest of her life. She grew fast. By 11, she stood nearly as tall as the adults around her, and the other children at school found a nickname for it. They called her Moose. She said later that the teasing pushed her to go looking for something she could be excellent at, something that would belong to her alone. That thing arrived in 1946. Her family took her to watch an exhibition match at San Diego Country Club between Byron Nelson and Leo Deagle. She was 11 years old, and she came away from it changed. She told the New York Times decades later what happened on her first trip to a driving range. She swung so hard that she broke the clubs in her own beginner's set. That was the pattern. She read everything about golf she could find. She kept scrapbooks of the players she admired. At 11, she went round in 145. By 12, she had broken 100. By 13, she was shooting in the low 80s. And through all of it, her father said almost nothing. He was, by her own account, the biggest influence on her golfing life. He was also the reason she kept pushing. She put it plainly years afterwards. My father was a huge influence on my golfing life, and he never told me he thought I'd done well until it was all over. She was a child learning a simple, dangerous lesson that no result is ever quite enough. It would take her to the top of the sport. It would also, eventually, take her out of it. The swing that Hogan and Nelson would spend the rest of their lives praising began with a branch. Her first teacher was Johnny Bellante, the professional at La Jolla Country Club, where her father was a member. At their first lesson, Bellante walked over to a eucalyptus tree, snapped off a limb, and put it in her hands. He told her he wanted her to make the branch sing. To get a sound out of it, she had to move it through the air with everything she had, fast but smooth. She said it was a wonderful first lesson because it taught her the sensation of swinging through the ball rather than at it. The real architect came later. His name was Harry Pressler, and he worked out of San Gabriel Country Club near Los Angeles. He had a reputation across California as the finest teacher of women players in the state. So for 2 years, every Saturday, her mother put her in the car and drove her north, 2.5 hours up, the same again coming back. Roughly 400 kilometers of road for a lesson that lasted 30 minutes. On the wall of Pressler's office hung a photograph of Ben Hogan practicing with a belt strapped around his thighs and a band around his upper arms. Pressler did not believe in individual styles. He believed there was one correct swing, and he would physically move his student into each position until her muscles learned to find them on their own. Wright never claimed the credit. She told Golf Digest, "My swing, which people have praised, is really Harry's swing." And she went further than that. She admitted the whole thing was, in her word, somewhat manufactured. It had rhythm and it had tempo, but the positions were assembled deliberately, one at a time, on a practice tee. The most natural-looking swing in the history of golf was nothing of the kind. It was constructed by a teacher, a stubborn child, and a mother willing to drive 400 kilometers for half an hour. In 1954, still an amateur, still 19 years old, Wright was drawn to play the final 36 holes of the U.S. Women's Open alongside Babe Didrikson Zacharias. Zacharias was the most famous woman in American sport. She was also playing while recovering from surgery for colon cancer, which almost nobody in the gallery seemed to register because she was still overwhelming to be near. Wright said she was scared out of her boots. Babe, she remembered, seemed larger than life, almost like something from another planet. The muscle in her arms and legs was unlike anything Wright had seen on a woman before. Zaharias owned the crowd completely. On one hole, she called her husband over to shield her while she removed her girdle, then held it up for the gallery and told them to watch her hit it now. The 19-year-old beside her blushed. Babe thought nothing of it. Zaharias won that championship by 12 strokes. Wright finished 17 shots behind her, tied for fourth, and was the leading amateur in the field. 2 years later, Babe was gone. Wright turned professional in 1954 and joined the tour the following year. She won for the first time in 1956 in Jacksonville. Then came 1958. At Forest Lake in Michigan, she led every single round of the U.S. Women's Open and finished 5 strokes clear of Louise Suggs. Nobody else in the field came within 6. Her 4-round total was 2 under par, a new championship record. The mark she broke had been set 4 years earlier by Babe Zaharias in the very tournament where a frightened teenager had walked the last 2 days at her shoulder. Earlier that same season, she had also won the LPGA Championship, becoming the first player ever to take both titles in a single year. At 23, she was no longer watching the legend. She had replaced her in the record book. What Mickey Wright did between 1961 and 1964 does not have a comparison in professional golf. 44 tournament victories in 4 seasons, 8 of them major championships. 10 wins in 1961, 10 again in 1962, 13 in 1963, 11 in 1964. The 1963 season is the one that still refuses to age. 13 victories out of 32 events entered, 27 top 10 finishes in 28 starts. More than 6 decades later, no woman has matched either number. Across that whole stretch, she finished either first or second in more than half the tournaments she played. She also became the only player in the history of the tour to hold all 4 major titles at the same moment, winning the last 2 majors of 1961, then the first 2 of 1962. It has not happened since. Tom Watson, looking back on it, called it the best run anybody has ever had in golf. Not the best run in women's golf, in golf. Wright had her own word for what it felt like when everything worked. She did not call it the zone. She called it the fog, a state where her concentration went somewhere else entirely and the confidence arrived without being asked. She described it once like this: "When I play my best golf, I feel as if I'm in a fog, standing back watching the earth in orbit with a golf club in my hands." She was in the fog on the day she went round in 62, a score no other woman on the tour would equal for 27 years, at a time when equipment gave a player nothing for free. Women professionals then were using the same heavy, unforgiving clubs the men carried. Her strength was the long iron, the hardest club in the bag, and she hit it higher than anyone. Kathy Whitworth, who would eventually pass her on the all-time win list, never pretended it made her the better player. She said she had been lucky enough to play with Sam Snead, Jack Nicklaus, Arnold Palmer, and all of them, and that some of the women had wonderful swings too. Then she added the line that followed Wright for the rest of her life: "But nobody hit it like Mickey. Just nobody." In 1960, Wright moved to Dallas and was invited to make Oak Cliff Country Club her home base by the professional there, a man named Earl Stewart. He was a fine player and a fine teacher, and she respected him more than almost anyone in the game. They played matches for 50 cents. She hit driver, he hit a 2-iron off the tee, and she is not sure she ever beat him. She begged him to talk to her about her swing. He refused, every time. He told her it was not about the swing, it was about how you got yourself around a golf course. She wanted to please him. That, in the end, is the part that matters. In 1961, she won 10 tournaments. She came back to Oak Cliff hoping for some sign of approval. Stewart told her it was pretty good, but that she should be winning every tournament. She assumed he was joking. She doubled her efforts anyway. In 1962, she won 10 again. Not good enough, he said. You should win every time. In 1963, she won 13, the greatest season any woman has ever had. She drove back to Dallas. Stewart gave her the same answer. It was the same shape as her father's silence, delivered by a different man. No total was ever going to be the total. The pressure from outside was worse. She had become the reason the tour existed at all. Whitworth explained it bluntly years later. Sponsors threatened to cancel their tournaments if Wright did not enter them. And because everyone knew that a canceled event meant the rest of the field had nowhere to play that week, Mickey always entered. On top of that, she served 2 terms as president of the tour while she was still the best player in it, attending, by her own count, every cocktail party and every civic luncheon that came with the job. The body kept score. She developed an ulcer. She had anxiety she could not put down. And she summed the whole period up in a single line that says more than any statistic, it wasn't the years, it was the mileage. Speaking to Golf World in 2000, more than 30 years after she left, she was still trying to explain it to people who had never carried it. She said it was a lot of pressure to be in contention week after week for 5 or 6 years. I guess they call it burnout now, but it wore me out. Then she said the thing that gives the whole story away. Finishing second or third is not bad, she said, but it feels bad when you have won 44 tournaments in 4 years. In July of 1964, the U.S. Women's Open came to San Diego Country Club, the course she had played as a teenager in the city where she was born. She arrived at the last hole of regulation, needing par to stay alive. Her approach found a bunker beside the green. Ruth Jessen, playing alongside her, made birdie. Wright came out of the sand to 5 feet and holed it to force a playoff. The next day, over 18 holes, she shot 2 under and won by 2. It was her 4th U.S. Women's Open title, a mark that has never been beaten by anyone and matched only by Betsy Rawls. But the reason she remembered that week for the rest of her life had nothing to do with the record. Her parents had divorced years earlier. That afternoon in San Diego, both of them were standing there. It was the first time my mother and father, who had been divorced, were both at a tournament I won, she said. She added that there is something about winning at home that feels almost like cheating, the good, honest kind. The approval she had spent 20 years chasing finally arrived. It did not come as a sentence. It came as 2 people in a gallery. 5 years later, it was over. In 1969, at 34, Wright stopped playing a full schedule. The reasons stacked on top of one another. Her feet had been failing for years. She had developed a bad reaction to sunlight. She had come to hate flying. And underneath all of it was the exhaustion she had been carrying since the Dallas years. She tried to build another life. With her leg in a cast from a sprained ankle, she enrolled at Southern Methodist University, thinking she would find a way to put her mind to work. She lasted 1 quarter. College had changed from what she remembered, and she found the atmosphere impossible to reconcile with a sport where players called penalties on themselves. She went back to what she knew. Kathy Whitworth, who finished her own career with 88 victories, always believed the numbers were misleading. If Mickey had kept playing, she said, she would have gone past 100. That is the size of what the game lost, and nobody ever took it from her. She handed it back. There was one more win. In 1973, 4 years after she had left the tour, she turned up at the Colgate Dinah Shore and took it, wearing sneakers, because her feet could no longer tolerate golf shoes. 6 years after that, at 44, she walked into a 5-way playoff in New Jersey and lost it to a young Nancy Lopez. Everyone standing there understood what they were watching. It is remembered now as the closest thing to a real contest the 2 of them ever had. Then she went quiet and stayed quiet. She settled in Florida and spent the next 4.5 decades gardening, fishing, working crossword puzzles, and following the stock market. When the museum built a room in her honor and filled it with her clubs, she was delighted and did not travel to see it. She sent them the small square of artificial turf she had been hitting off on her back porch. She hit one last shot from it and let it go. Then friends in Indiana heard about it and posted her a brand new mat. She knew exactly what that meant. Put a mat, some balls, and a club in front of a golfer, she said, and the temptation is going to be too much. So she kept going, 5 or 6 balls at a time, out onto the fairway behind her house into her 80s. Just enough, in her own words, to remain a golfer. The two men who shaped her golfing life had both told her, in their own way, that what she had done was not yet enough. In the end, she was the one who decided what enough looked like. It looked like 5 golf balls, hit well, on a quiet afternoon, for nobody.